Welcome to the Cyber Rants Podcast, where we're all about sharing the forbidden secrets and slightly embellished truths about corporate cybersecurity programs. We're ranting, we're raving, and we're telling you the stuff that nobody talks about on their fancy website and trade show giveaways, all to protect you from cybersecurity criminals. And now, here's your hosts, Mike Rotondo, Zach Fuller, and Lauro Chavez.
Hello and welcome to the Cyber Rants Podcast. This is your co-host, Zach Fuller, joined by Lauro Chavez and Mike Rotondo. Mike, why don't you kick us off with the news today?
Hey, good morning. Some headlines today. I think I got 13 or 14 of them. The first one is researchers uncovered a new malware builder dubbed APO Macrosploit. It's used to create weaponized Excel documents. They've seen this in the wild already. Experts warn of threat actors abusing Google Alerts to deliver unwanted programs. What's happening here is clicking on links sent by Google Alerts related to matches in fake stories. Users are redirected to malicious websites, so be careful out there. New Silver Sparrow malware infects 30,000 Macs for unknown purpose. There's malware out there. They've detected in about 30,000 devices across 153 countries, primarily in the United States and the UK. It's distributed in two different files, update.pkg and update.pkg, or .pkg, and no one knows what it's there for. So, interesting. From the creepy side of cyber criminals, if there is such a thing, Nursery Cam daycare cam service shut down after security breach. This is a service in the UK. Apparently, someone had breached the system and was watching children sleep. So, yeah, you go. Shadow attacks let attackers replace content and digitally sign as PDFs. Basically, what's happening is that they're able to create a PDF with two different contents. One is of the party expected to sign something. The other piece is a hidden content that's displayed once the PDF is signed, and they're using this as a backdoor. These hackers sell network logins to the highest bidder at ransomware gangs are buying. We now have a new development in cyber criminals. We now have brokers that break into networks. Rather than exploiting the campaigns, they just resell them to middlemen. Access to remote desktop protocol RDP is the most sought after listing, obviously. But yet, this is a new thing. I think a couple of weeks ago we talked about the malware or the cyber criminals that were stealing other criminals' credit cards that they'd stolen. Well, now we've got brokers selling access. Bitter APT enhances its capabilities with Windows kernel zero-day exploit. There's a new exploit, new zero-day, that supposedly was patched February 2021. So sometime this month it was patched. It's exploit CVE 2021-1732. Needless to say, another Microsoft exploit. Legal firm leaks 15,000 cases via the cloud. An unsecured AWS S3 bucket containing 55,000 documents is left wide open. So be careful with your legal providers out there. APT 32 state hackers are targeting human rights. This comes from Amnesty International, which said that certain bloggers have been receiving spyware, emails containing spyware between 2018 and November 2020. This is one that blows my mind. 119,000 threats per minute were detected in 2020.
I said, that seems low.
Yeah. Email-borne threats such as phishing attacks accounted for 91% of the 62.6 billion threats blocked by Trend Micro last year. This is just Trend Micro's number. So, yeah, it probably is low. Nearly 14 million unique phishing URLs are detected by the company, with home networks being the primary target. This is scary. The cyber attacks on home networks surged 210% year over year to just under 2.9 billion. Vast majority of strikes, however, are against brute forcing logins on smart devices and routers. So make sure those are secured. Make sure you get a long password. Make sure you change it every once in a while. Microsoft president asked Congress to force private sector orgs to publicly admit when they've been hacked. Okay, well, when Microsoft admits it, then we'll admit it. Smith argued it's time not only to talk about a way to force private entities to admit publicly that they've been hacked. So that's more good news from your government. There's two stories that came out about critical flaws in the VMware ESXi vSphere client. Basically, patch it immediately. The error allows an unauthorized user to send specially crafted requests, which will later give them an opportunity to execute arbitrary commands on the server. And it is accessible from the internet and has been seen in the wild. So check out that headline in the blog. Microsoft lures populate half of credential swiping phishing emails. According to researchers, beyond the 45% of credential stealing phishing attacks targeting Microsoft, basically Microsoft's a huge target and always will be, and that includes SharePoint, OneDrive, and Office 365. But they're also attacking Google Forms and Adobe file sharing services, but Microsoft is the big target out here. Lastly, criminals are targeting QuickBook databases. There's two different attacks. There's a PowerShell command that runs inside a malicious email, and the other one is a Word document that has a malicious macro or link in it. So if you got QuickBooks, be careful. And with that said, Laurel, anything you got for us?
Yeah, I got a few things. I got a shirt design idea for anybody out there listening that wants to make me a shirt. I'd like a Ken or a Ryu from Street Fighter shooting out a fireball, only it says PowerShell. I think that'd be cool. Anyways, so for this week, really is only one thing to talk about. So if you're not familiar with Raxis, they're a security firm specializes in penetration testing, and one of their senior guys, Matt Dunn, was able to produce a really cool Metasploit module that takes advantage of the remote desktop web access client. So when you've got RDP open, you can enable that web access portion of that. And so this is an authentication timing attack, and it's a really cool method to validate usernames that you might have for admins and stuff like that. And so it's not verified, but just taking a look at all the Python 3 code I can't imagine it wouldn't work. But I'm really excited to try this out. So I'm trying to get up a Windows 10 VM spun up so I can see if this actually works as designed. But for everybody else out there, make sure that your Windows desk, if you're running RDP external at all, make sure you've got some form of security boundary in place to protect that. Whether you're using whitelisting or hardware certs or VPN or however you're doing it, just know that these types of attacks are becoming more prevalent, especially from a proof of concept perspective. And now they're just adding these they're just building Metasploit modules for you. So cool stuff. That's all I got.
Before we dive into it, Mike, I can't help but bring this up for the people on Office 365 because I hear about it over and over and over again. Just heard about another one. Please, please, please make your users use hard passwords and two-factor authentication with the Authenticator app, not text to your cell phone, because Office 365 continues to get breached left and right like crazy. It's just nuts. But you'd be amazed how many organizations are not using the basic security features to prevent this. Just wanted to throw that out there. Hopefully it saves somebody from getting an email compromise and sending out wires to malicious actors. That said, that dovetails right into our topic today. And the topic is all about reactive versus proactive security. But what does that mean? You hear a lot about proactive security and being proactive with your security program and all those things, but very few people stop and really talk about that and define the difference and talk about both sides of the equation, right? So that's what we're here to answer today. And I think just to talk on the proactive side briefly and kind of what that's generally used for in terms of content on websites and blogs and everything else, are generally talking about proactive being, getting in front of the threat, as meaning the threat being an attacker. But I would argue that it's also getting in front of security questionnaires coming down before they come down to your organization, right? So growing tech companies, for example, right? Getting in front of compliance requirements before there's an audit. Those things, I think, also need to be taken into account. So that's what we're here to talk about today. Mike, Lauro, any thoughts, any ideas to start out on recommendations on how to look at each and where you really need to be focusing the majority of your time, or at least how to balance your time between the two?
Good topic, Zach. I think to talk about it. I think a lot of organizations may be in various, they're all in various, places with this, right? With cybersecurity, both, from understanding it to just getting some base level tools installed where they're, really kind of reactive and sort of just trying to understand the data that the tools are delivering. And that, if you're there, I'm sure we'll get into a little deeper here, but just for high level, right? If you're stuck in that mode, that's okay. I think a lot of organizations are you have to kind of go through this evolution, right? Where you don't know what's going on, you get some tools. Now you have a lot of data, you're not quite sure what's going on. And then, now once the dust settles on that, you can begin sort of a proactive posture now. But while you're being reactive and while you're still trying to understand the data that you're getting today with maybe new tools or new capabilities, telemetry that you may have installed, make sure that you're thinking ahead, right? You also need that parallel track, because defensive and reactive is not near enough. You need to have that proactive visibility toward attack surface modeling and threat hunting and those sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have the technology aspect and then the governance aspect as well. And I think that's what a lot of the tendency to be reactive in nature from a cybersecurity perspective is because the strategy and upfront planning hasn't been done for the organization. And so that just kind of forces them into default mode. I think by default, a reactive mode is kind of, the way companies will operate if they don't actually take the time to stop and think through their program and start to formalize that program. And it's not just on the technology side, but also we have to look at the human element, right, in a big way, equipping them. So there's lots of information out there on security awareness training and such. That's not the purpose of today's episode, but that's a big factor, I think, in trying to get ahead of the threats, looking at it from all angles of the organization, rather than waiting for a tool to pop up a red flag and saying, oh, wait, now we got to investigate this. So it's an interesting thing. And then, but on the reactive side, there's certainly a need to define that as well, right? Where we see a lot of organizations fall short is in their incident response planning, for example. If something happens, they don't necessarily know how to quantify it, how to classify it, and as a result, they don't know the appropriate actions to take, and are kind of caught off guard completely. That can be a very, very big problem. So I think that there's a certain amount of consideration that needs to go into the reactive side as well. But how to blend the time, I don't know if there's a magic answer for that. Where do you spend more of your time?
So for your IR and DR plans, which are arguably reactive plans, but there's a proactive component to it, and that's the blend is proactively. We're going to test this. We're going to do tabletop exercises occasionally. We're going to do a full failover to our hot site. We're going to have our workers work remotely one day this week just to verify, although this is less relevant now because most people are, just to verify that our infrastructure can handle it, right? We ran into this prior to COVID, and we had a client that swore up and down they would have no problem, and all of a sudden COVID hit and they went, oh crap, nothing's working. So that's the proactive side of that reactive piece, right? So
you know what they say about assuming? It makes butts out of everybody. Anyways, you're right, Zach. A lot of organizations, they don't, none of this. I mean, out of all the clients that I've ever worked with, I've only ever been outside of the Department of Defense, only ever been with one public sector client that was like, we're going to build something. That sounds like a cool idea. How do we secure it from the get-go? It's only happened one time, right? So I wish it was more common, but everyone else seems to speed to market and then realize that in order to obtain a hold in, maybe some places or into some larger companies, they have to meet, these sort of compliance regulations. And that is, like you said, that when they begin the whole pathway of like, oh, we want the sale. So how do we implement security? And they'll be reactive and then that'll be a bare minimum, right? Isn't that kind of how the tone goes, right? Well, what's the cheapest way we can do this and meet this initiative? As opposed to looking at what the principle should be is that how do we secure our business so that we don't have a loss of integrity? We don't have a loss of customers. We can maintain that, we've thought about this from the get-go.
Right. It's when we look at it from a reactive, from a perspective of an attack happening, or some sort of potentially malicious activity, something out of the norm. That's one side of the equation. But another thing that can be detrimental is like you said, when all of a sudden a company is reacting because a prospective client engagement is on the line, right? And they could lose that. I think where that can be detrimental from a revenue perspective is that the companies spend all this time building beautiful websites, great user interface, everything is really dialed in. They got their sales process set, everything's looking good. So on the front end, their prospects say, okay, all this looks good. But as soon as they pull back the curtains, the very next thing they're going to look at is a cybersecurity program. And when that's not in line and the company can't show it, that undermines all that other work that they did, and they can lose the client. I mean, it happens daily out there. And so that can be tremendous in terms of looking at, when you're looking at, the risk factors. It's not just a risk factor from a breach, it's opportunity cost, lost revenue, right? And money spent on trying to acquire clients that don't come through because you get stuck in the vendor vetting process and they go elsewhere. Not to mention that they're willing to pay more for companies that are secure, that are really dialed in, do have their ducks in a row from a security standpoint. So we see that regularly out there in the market space, in the B2B environments, especially.
Supply chain security, that's what they're calling it, right? They want all the third parties that are involved in, providing something technical for your business as that technical supply chain. They want those all to be secure, secure third parties, right? They're going to assess you and they're going to expect you to, to answer properly, or like you said, they'll pay more to not have the integrity loss to their business brand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But it's interesting, and even security tools. I'm going to throw this out here, right? We get pitched cybersecurity tools a lot because we're a cybersecurity firm, right? And there's a lot of cool stuff out there. And what is the very first thing we ask? Well, what are you doing on the behind the scenes? Have you had a pen test? Can we talk about methods you're using today to secure, access controls inside the code of the application? And to date, we've not had a solid answer, even from organizations that are building tools that cybersecurity professionals and cybersecurity teams would use for their businesses. It's kind of interesting, right? You still have that kind of method of thinking out there, even with the prevalence of cybersecurity today and the need for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in kind of looking at it in a linear fashion, let's talk a little bit about how companies should get into a more proactive state as an organization while still having the reactive side covered, right? Because you can't stop everything. Nothing's 100% secure, so you need the reactive side. But let's talk a little bit about from getting from point A to point B in this, and that's for us, it's always starts with clients, with pretty much anybody that we're working with on an ongoing basis to build a formalized security program. We need to start out by choosing an industry standard framework, right? Doing a risk assessment, gap analysis against that framework, and then creating a roadmap with a plan of action milestones to move forward, right? So to me, and certainly open to your thoughts, but to me, it's the step number one, priority number one is creating clarity across the entire organization. Understand where you are today, where you need to go, and plot the route to get there. And then from there, and I'd even say in parallel, we're already starting to do some preventative measures, right? Getting to understand the environment, doing pen testing, doing vulnerability scanning, understanding where the potential attack surfaces are to seal those up. And then that kind of gives us we call it the systems triage phase, right? Trying to understand what the low-hanging fruit is, what attackers are seeing or could potentially see, and then taking care of that first, right? Is kind of the immediate, because the implementation of everything else is going to take a while, but at least we can kind of cover the basis first. And to me, I think that's the kind of the first phase of proactive cybersecurity. Any other thoughts on that? Any ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a good point. And so if we look at other just common things in the world, like if you have a CDL, right? For those out there that have CDLs, before you can move that commercial vehicle anywhere, there has to be an inspection done on it. You have to go around it, make sure all the lights work, right? Make sure you got air in the tires. I mean, there's like you can't just, same thing for pilots. You can't just get in, hit the button and go. We should think about technology and delivering, these types of built for purpose uses in the same manner. And to Zach, your point, I agree with you. That is absolutely the plan. But before that, I'd say step 0 has to be commitment, right? And we taught this before. You have, as a business, as a leader, you have to commit to cybersecurity, because once you get that gap assessment, there is no more ability for plausible deniability, right? There are not going to be any unknowns anymore. They're going to be unknown unknowns. But you're going to now see where you sit against a framework, and it's most times it's going to be on the low bar, and you're going to need to start making that stairway to heaven, so to speak. And so that's going to take time, and it's going to take patience, and it's certainly in most cases going to take a little bit of money being moved around in certain aspects, depending on what you've done already. Sometimes not so much, sometimes a lot more. But I think that commitment piece is key. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, it has to start with a leadership decision, commitment, and then that has to be articulated well to the rest of the organization, because everybody's going to be involved and have some level of capability in terms of preventing cyber attacks, right? And
totally. And at the other side of the coin, right? Once you've done all this, because we've talked a lot, there's probably a lot of organizations listening to this that are, in this probably spot, but there's probably a small aspect that have already gotten through all this. They have the roadmap. They've got a team. They've got telemetry. They're investigating. They're writing tickets, right? They're chasing ghosts in the machine. They're getting to the point where they're starting to parse out the data that's meaningful to them in a dashboard style, so that they understand, from millions or billions of bytes of data, what's really meaningful, right? The actual couple KB that's actual and meaningful thing. They're getting to that point. And I think it's a good thing for them to know that's great that you're there, but it's like getting to the top of Mount Everest. That's fantastic. Now you've got to go back down. So don't forget that there's still, there has to be that proactive window that we've talked about, right? Threat hunting, maybe consistent penetration testing campaigns with, automated tools that are going out there. You can certainly use automated bots to do a lot of work for you. And the more often you do it, the more you're going to know about the organization. So if you're to that place, right, if you've already got the maturity there and you've got an attestation to a framework and you've been doing it for a couple of years, and your teams are starting to kind of plateau on chasing ghosts in the machine and actually ignoring all that stuff, and now your telemetry is giving you really meaningful data. That's, even before this though, but it's hard for organizations to start that proactive piece with threat hunting and all those things while they're still just trying to understand the tools they have. Perfect world, you would be doing both at the same time. But if you've plateaued, that's where you need to start looking for advanced threats and those things in the architecture that may not be visible to the automated tools, where you're going to need domain knowledge of the deployed architecture to understand what weaknesses may exist, right? Real threat hunting.
Well, and staying ever vigilant, just dovetailing off what you were saying, is the key, right? You're never secure. There's always a threat that, as we note in the headlines, they're evolving daily, if not hourly. So you got to stay up. You got to stay up. You got to stay on the trends. You got to stay trained. You got to stay, in the news. You got to read what's going on and stay proactive from that perspective as well. Keep your people engaged. Send them to training. Send them to seminars. All those things keep you secure long term.
And for those organizations that are have a bit more matured cybersecurity program, like you're referring to, that's outstanding. But keep in mind too, there's always a next evolution, right, of the program. And a lot of times, what we see for organizations that have built a good program, they're monitoring well, they're being proactive in their assessment of the organization, testing of the organization. A lot of times the next struggle is always staffing, right? And the actual human element side. And so that's another thing when you're at that point, everything's looking really good. We'll start looking at the human element in more detail. Do we have redundancies in our subject matter experts? How is our recruiting going, right? Do we have a pipeline of people that we could potentially work with if we lose somebody, right? What are those backups in place? And then also the managerial side or the leadership side of it, right? Are we going to continue to get full buy-in? I think one of the things is that we look outside of the organization for threats and such in terms of trying to be proactive, but then we also have to look at the fact that, I hate to say it, but when nothing happens in cybersecurity, a lot of times it gets, kind of put by the wayside, right? The executive leadership will tend to just say, well, where can we cut costs here and there? I mean, we see this happen out there when things are going well. From our perspective, it means that the rest of the organization doesn't have to hear about it, right? There's nothing to report because, there's no bad news.
It's a cybersecurity offer an afterthought until something breaks. And then it's like, well, where are the security people?
Exactly. We have to remember that. Otherwise, I hate to say it, but funding's going to dwindle, support from the organization is going to dwindle. So you have to be constantly putting out that message internally. Don't think of your threats as all as APTs and such out there in the world and nation state adversaries that are after, money and everything else. That's not always the biggest threat for organizations. A lot of times it's internal.
But I think you also have to change the mindset and think about that. We're actually, it's really war. It's cyber warfare out there. I mean, these are people that are trying to take your stuff. They're declaring war on you. And I think, and you guys can speak to this better than I can, but, if the army gets complacent in the battlefield, then it is apt to lose its edge and become, ineffective. And it's the same thing with internal cybersecurity people. And your cybersecurity thinking is if you become complacent, then problems are going to arise.
Absolutely. Yeah. Proactive doesn't mean outpacing the threats. Proactive means continually getting better yourselves as an organization, right? Regardless of what the world around you is doing, continuing to push. And I think that's true in any business or even with athletes and such. It's all about that continuous improvement, continuous focus, rather than checking the blocks. So that said, we are there. I mean, we could talk on all kinds of different nuanced aspects of this, but we're running out of time here. Any final thoughts for the day?
One thing, if you're to the point where you're doing, you've got your incident response, you need to be running tabletop exercises. Make it fun. I like to, those who get to work with me know that I do a D&D style kind of LARP with the with the incident response and the DR exercises. And so, think of things like this to make it fun. So it's not so, not fun. That's it.
Well, also, bring in a third party to run it. So you're not having, the same people running the DR exercise or the IR exercise. That'll add a twist too of uncertainty as well. That's
Sure.
a good idea.
Great point. Outstanding. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. Thank you for listening. Please rate us, rate the podcast. Let us know what you think. Let us know topics you'd like us to cover in the future, and we will be happy to address those. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Take care.
Bye.
Pick up your copy of the Cyber Rants book on Amazon today. And if you're looking to take your cybersecurity program to the next level, visit us online at www.silentsector.com. Join us next time for another edition of the Cyber Rants podcast.